We want free and fair elections in Zimbabwe. And there can never be free and fair elections where the delimitation report is so fundamentally flawed. This is a recipe for disaster for our country. It makes our country a laughing stock. It makes our country's reputation as a constitutional democracy go up in the winds.
The Constitutional Court was the center of the battle here in Harare, as political gladiators face each other ahead of a bruising and crucial 2023 general election. Now, the argument is that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission failed in its mandate to do a delimitation report that will produce a free and fair result of the election. MDCT, led by Douglas Togarase Mwonzora, was in the Constitutional Court arguing that the delimitation report is unconstitutional, should be declared null and void, and the ZEC should go back to the drawing table and bring out a new delimitation report. Now this week on this, The Free Talk, with me, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, we go deep into the constitutional issue. We make you understand what is at stake in this constitutional challenge. Now join me after this break as I join the litigant, Douglas Togarase Mwonzora, the MDCT president, to understand what the delimitation debate, what the constitutional challenge is all about. On this, The Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation on Heart and Soul TV and radio. Now, welcome back to this, The Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. And in studio, I have Douglas Togarase Mwonzora, the MDCT president. Join us. Senator Mwonzora, on Monday you were in Concourt and you suffered a deadly blow. Is that correct?
It is not a deadly blow. The Constitutional Court dismissed our application on a technicality, which means that the application can still be taken up. Of course, we view the behavior, the stance taken by the Constitutional Court as a mere waste of time, because this matter is going to come back to them anyway. But yes, the Constitutional Court made the ruling that it made. We did not have respect for that reasoning. And we suspect that they took a political stance instead of looking at the law. For example, they were querying about whether I had locus standi as president of a party. And yet the same court entertained Jealous Mawarire in 2013. He was not even an official of any political party. He was just a Zimbabwean. And the standard was then changed for us. After all, this application had two applicants, myself as president of the MDC and the MDC itself, which filled candidates from president, member of parliament and councillors. So we did not understand what the Constitutional Court was trying to get to. But the good thing is that this matter was not dismissed on the merits. They simply said they were declining to exercise their jurisdiction. In other words, they were avoiding dealing with the matter. We are flattered by that, Blessed, because the highest court of the land was afraid to look at the merits of the case. And we are flattered, and we think that on the merits of the case, we do have a strong case, and there is an avenue available for us.
I mean, staying on that aspect, that the Constitutional Court refused to exercise its jurisdiction, what is then the way forward if the Constitutional Court, which deals with constitution, was this a constitutional matter, by the way? And it is the only court that has jurisdiction to deal with constitutional matters, is it not?
No, other courts like the High Court can. What we interpreted the Constitutional Court to be driving at is that it did not want to hear the matter as a court of first instance. It would rather probably hear the matter on appeal. And as I said, this is work avoidance. But the High Court has jurisdiction to hear the matter and has jurisdiction to issue the declarators that we were asking the court to give us. They said two interesting things. The first one was that we should have argued only that the delimitation is invalid. And I should not have said that my rights were violated. Which is a bit very difficult to understand. My rights will be violated as a result of the violation of the law. If you have an invalid delimitation report, for example, it means as a candidate I may not have enough information about how many people are in each constituency, and therefore how would I plot my campaign trail, my campaign plan? Where will I go first and why? That information would be easily be gotten from the delimitation report.
The court also asked you whether you had any supporters. Let's talk about that.
Yes, that is a very strange thing to say. I mean, this is a party that has been in existence for a long time, and it has a president, it has members, and I don't know what the court wanted us to do. Did they want us to bring all the supporters of the MDC into the courtroom? That is also impractical. And this is the first time that a question like that is being posed on a political leader. Certainly the MDC does have supporters. One may argue whether we have more supporters than party X or Y, but certainly the MDC does have supporters. It was a strange question.
Now I want us to look at Senator Mwonzora arguments that the remedies that you were looking at, which came from Jeremiah Bamu, that the remedy of delaying the election would be unconstitutional.
Well, as I said, it will not be unconstitutional. To defer an election will not be unconstitutional. And talking about Jeremiah Bamu, if you look at the arguments that he then made through his lawyer, who was then later not allowed to speak, but they had written the arguments. In that argument, Jeremiah Bamu actually argues for a postponement. But this postponement, he says, about a month. And his argument was that the declaration by the president did not give sufficient time, and that the election could be postponed by 1 month. Now, in my papers, I never make any suggestion about the period of postponement. Now, there are two competing rights, Blessed. The first right is the right to a free and fair election, which is contained in the Bill of Rights. And then there is the right to have an election by a certain date, which is not in the Bill of Rights. It is a standard legal practice that where the two rights conflict or clash, the right which is in the Bill of Rights takes precedence. And the judges, of course, they were within their power to say, of these two competing rights, we are going to uphold that one and not that one. And they should have just proceeded to do that. But sometimes when a government or an authority violates laws, it generates unintended consequences. It is never the intention of the MDC that elections must be delayed. But we now had an invalid delimitation report that was certainly going to be abused to steal elections. And we were able to prove how these elections will be stolen and so on. And that then necessitated the relief that we sought. And the relief was, number one, that the delimitation report be declared invalid. Number two, that ZEC be ordered to redo. Number three, that the proclamation must come after ZEC is redone. Now, the amicus wanted a postponement by a month. I could rhetorically ask him a question, what the difference would be for Zimbabwe in real terms between 1 month and 6 months. 6 months being the period that the ZEC took to do delimitation. And if they were asked to redo the delimitation, one would just assume that they would take 6 months as well. So if we add 6 months to May, we were going to get somewhere to December. And I see we saw no real fundamental prejudice that Zimbabweans would suffer.
But it would be 6 months for the delimitation report to come in, another 6 months for the delimitation report to be used in the election, because the Constitution states that you
could be very right, Blessed. You could be very right in that summation. But one has to make a value judgment. Is it necessary? Is it better to wait for a year by Zimbabweans and do a proper elections? Or is it better to have to an election which is patently unfree and unfair, and which is actually being manipulated by state organs? What is better? It was going to be a value judgment. We made that value judgment as the MDC, and we thought that a slight delay would be better.
Of a year.
A slight delay would be better. Even if it is a year, Blessed, it will be better. The benefits of a free and fair election are that, one, we have a realistic chance of changing government, which we don't have now, going with this manipulation that is there. Number two, that we have Zimbabweans, starting from ZEC, political parties, adequately preparing themselves. So the benefits of having free and fair elections are so immense. There is a possibility that the international isolation of Zimbabwe could be eased if you have free and fair elections. You make a better case. Zimbabwe wants to join the Commonwealth. They have already talked about the quality of our elections, and delaying them in order to do better would have probably resulted in us joining the Commonwealth earlier. So the recipe by the MDC actually would shorten the suffering of the people of Zimbabwe rather than lengthen. Remember, this delimitation report is going to govern 2 elections. It's going to last us 10 years. The 2023 elections and the 2028 election. And if it is a bad report, we are going to have 2 bad elections in succession. And that is not desirable.
When the constitutional amendment came to Parliament, you voted yes for it, and one of it is what saw the retention of Chief Justice Malaba. Do you regret voting yes on that?
No, I do not. I do not, because unfortunately for us, unfortunately for the MDC, when voting time came, you had to vote either yes or no. But when debate was done, and I want to invite you to look at the answer. how I debated against the retention of Justice Malaba, the extension of the term. I actually debated against it.
But you voted for it?
But the amendment did not have that only. It had the women's quota, it had the youth quota, things that I did not want us to lose. It also had the women's quota in local government. Those things were too important for us as the MDC. That on a balance of probabilities, on the balance of convenience, we voted mostly for those three things.
You mentioned that your party suspects that Chief Justice Malaba and the bench took a political decision. Now, you retained one of the most important positions, which is now making political decisions on an important election.
Well,
would you not regret that?
Judges in this country have made political decisions even before this. Why I said, and I could say it in front of the Constitutional Court itself. And if you were there yesterday when I said that statement, I had the confidence because this is not sensible as a judgment. It is certainly political. It is certainly meant to avoid an embarrassment on an electoral body. And therefore, if the judges do that, in our constitutional democracy, we must point that out, and we must condemn it. And that is why we are saying we do not agree with what the Constitutional Court did yesterday. For example, spending so much time harassing the lawyers on the question of locus standi, on the question of section this and that and that and that, only to make a judgment on a completely different issue.
Was that issue addressed to the court?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. The judges came and said, we decline jurisdiction. We never argued about jurisdiction. If you remember, a few weeks ago, the same Constitutional Court approved my application for direct access. They said, yes, you have a strong case, come and argue it before us. And when I came and argued sought to argue before them, they then said, we can't hear you. And that is a contradiction. You can't invite somebody to court. You approve that, Mr. Mwonzora, you can appear in court before the full bench to argue your matter.
Are you embarrassed as a lawyer? Are you embarrassed as a lawyer when such judgments are made? When the courts are supposed to be the last bulwark of democracy?
Well, this is certainly disquieting, I should say. It's certainly disquieting for me to be invited by the court to appear before it. And they looked at it and they said, come and argue this thing. And we weren't prepared to argue that thing. The 20%, the issue of the population, the irregularities in the delimitation report. That's what we weren't prepared to do. And the lawyers were taken by surprise when things which were supposed to be settled were then brought in. And the lawyers did their best to show the Constitutional Court that it was going astray. The Constitutional Court then went back, came with a different justification for their decision, and that was suspect to us.
Senator Mwonzora, as you look forward, do you have confidence in a judiciary that you would accuse of making a political decision, especially given that most of the silent points in electoral processes normally end at their doorstep?
Well, it's not for me to say whether I do have confidence in the judiciary as a whole. I don't think the behavior of one or two judges justify the. Well, if you really understand what happens there, the judges got into recess, and they were supposed to do 20 minutes, and they came after 1 hour 20 minutes. That means something suspicious was happening. But we don't want to be drawn into condemning the judiciary or any organ of the state for that matter. Even the Chapter 12 institutions, we always appeal for them to exercise professionalism, to exercise fairness. They have an immense duty of being fair to the people of Zimbabwe, of being fair to the litigants that appear before them. Certainly the judges can't call us to court, approve our application to come before them, direct us to come and argue about particular issues, and then raise something completely different.
Going forward, what is it that you're going to do?
Well, there are a number of options, Blessed, that are available to us. One of them is to lodge this application before the High Court for the declaration of Section 161 to have been violated, after which consequential relief can be sought, which is what the Constitutional Court seems to have been implying. But as I said before, this was a waste of time, because if we appear before the High Court and let's say we succeed and the other party does not succeed, they will appeal and they may end up at the very court, at the very Constitutional Court. And that's why I think they should have just sorted that out. So we are still allowed to appear before the courts. We may file our application before the High Court. I will wait for the decision of the Standing Committee, which is sitting tomorrow. But as a lawyer myself, I think, and the advice that we got from the lawyers is that we can refile our application in the High Court. The Standing Committee will obviously make legal as well as political decision. I can't preempt what the political decision will be.
Immediately after the ruling, there was celebration through social media by presidential spokesperson Joe Charamba, using his monkey saying that you have failed and we are going to elections. And as you were in court, President Emerson Mnangagwa was making a declaration at the National Heroes Acre that elections are happening soon.
Well, I did see Charamba celebrating the Constitutional Court decision. I did see quite a number of opposition people celebrating that as well. Walter Mzembe was celebrating. He was calling the approach to the court a shenanigan. So he says the end of the shenanigan for Douglas Mwonzora and so on. It is highly tragic, Blessed, that people should do that. It is highly tragic that a presidential spokesperson celebrates a verdict by a court. That is improper. The courts are there for justice, and they must do justice to all people. The declaration by President Mnangagwa simply shows the disrespect that they have of the courts. A court, the highest court of the land, was making a decision, and President Mnangagwa is a lawyer. He knows that you can't make those declarations while your highest court of the land is actually sitting, unless, of course, the decision was predetermined. Now, if the decision was predetermined, I just want to address my opponents who have been accusing me of advancing the interests of ZANU-PF. And you then have ZANU-PF celebrating my loss. How was I representing them? And I think it puts paid to this very sickening accusation.
But the allegations that there are factions within the party. So the faction that was probably celebrating was the one that had won the day.
Oh, which faction does George Charamba belong to? And which other faction is there? I'm asking you that question without expecting an answer, of course, because you don't know. But here is a presidential spokesperson who speaks for everyone else, celebrating that they have won. He was not the only one. There was another ZANU-PF official who was celebrating as well, that we are going to go for elections and so on. They are not celebrating elections, Blessed. They are celebrating the unfairness and the unfair advantage that they are going to have They are the only people as a government who have knowledge about the population census report because it has been hidden from everyone else. They are the ones who know why they demarcated the constituencies this way. They are the ones who know the advantage that it will give them. They are the ones who will stand to benefit from lack of information that other people have. For example, I am a presidential candidate. Nelson is a presidential candidate. There were people last year who were 17 who don't feature in the delimitation report. We don't know how many those people are, and we don't also know how many people are 13 years this year who are going to be 18 years in 2028. We don't have that information. So there is information asymmetry in this election. And if there are parties who are celebrating that, maybe they are going to benefit, maybe they have the information, but there is information asymmetry.
I want to thank you very much, Senator Mwonzora, but just last week I had a conversation with Senator Mwonzora before the Constitutional Court was argued, and the such rich points that were raised in that conversation. Now we're just going to cross over to that interview, and we're going to listen to this interview which happened just before the Concourt set. Now this is the Free Talk. Just join us after this break and we will go through the interview that we had last week. Welcome back to this, the Free Talk, with me, your host as usual, Dara B. Now, thank you very much for joining us. And we were last week just celebrating the World Press Freedom Day. Now, in this, the Free Talk, we express free press and free media. Now, thank you very much, Senator Douglas Mwonzora, the president of the MDCT, for joining me. Now, let's just cut to the chase. You have a live case that is pending before the Constitutional Court. And I know you can't discuss the issues, but let us talk about the petition itself, what it is premised upon, and why you chose that title.
Oh, thank you very much. Just to correct you, Blessed, this is not a typical case which is governed by the sub judice rule. It's a public case. It's a case in the public interest, and you are free to canvass any aspect of the case for purposes of informing the viewers. So thank you very much. We filed this application as a result of two things that had happened. The first one was that the Parliament had set to discuss the delimitation report. All of the members of Parliament who were in the ad hoc committee condemned the delimitation report across the political divide. The three parties are represented in Parliament: ZANU-PF, MDC, CCC. And with the delimitation report our report on the delimitation got to Parliament, it was condemned by every member of Parliament except one, and that was Honorable Priscilla Moyo. Only one out of all those MPs said it was all right. That was the first issue. Then the second issue was that the president, having sent the report to ZEC, then proceeded to gazette the report. We looked at the gazetted report and we found that in a fundamental way, it was similar to the report that we had condemned in Parliament. And the gazetting of the report immediately meant that it was going to be used in the election. And we found 4 critical objections in the report. And therefore we then filed the Constitutional Court application. The Constitutional Court application is not designed to stop elections. It is not designed to prolong the suffering of the people of Zimbabwe. It is designed to even the playing field before we get to elections. And that was the only option available now, because dialogue had failed and so on. I had tried to talk to the powers that be about how bad this report was. So we found a few objections on the report. The first one was that the report does not consider population. in terms of the constitution, population demographics are a necessary consideration. You need to know how many people last year were 17, who are now 18, who were not considered by ZEC. You also need to know, if you are interested in 2028, about how many people are 13 years old now, because in 2028, blessed, they will be 18. So population is critically important, and the population distribution is also important for political actors. As a presidential candidate, one plots their campaign path. You address people at Gokwe, and then you go to Mvurwi, and then you go to Bikita. Certain factors, demographic factors, affect that. So the population census was done last year, and it was concluded in April. But the population census results are not yet out. So how can you demarcate a country without knowledge of its population? That's point number one. Point number two, the constitution is very clear that the constituencies must have more or less the same number of registered voters. And the only variation that is allowed should not exceed 20%, either more or less than other constituencies. Now, in 119 out of 210 constituencies, that very important rule is offended. And in 598 wards, that rule is also offended. Why is it necessary to have the same number of registered voters? It's very simple. MPs get constituency development fund. Now, in your constituency, you may have 100,000 people, and in my constituency, I may have 50,000 people, and we get the same amount of CDF. So the per capita benefit of the constituents of CDF in your constituency is half of what my people in the constituency get, and it is very, very wrong. So ZEC's report, you will find is constituents with 30%, 40%. The most outrageous one goes to 67%, more than others. So we found that very objectionable. And then, of course, there are other things, technical issues. I won't bother people about that. Then the issue of the gazetting itself, the gazetting of the report. There are two wrong things that happened. The first one was gazetting. The second was the proclamation by the president. The delimitation report that was gazetted makes a reference to Annexure A, Annexure B, Annexure C. Unfortunately, Annexure A, Annexure B, Annexure C are not there on the gazetted report. So it is an incomplete report. And then the proclamation that was made by the president is called Proclamation Number 1 of 2023. In terms of the constitution, the president must proclaim the names, the boundaries of the constituencies. In that proclamation, if you go and read it, which is one of the shortest proclamations I have seen in the history of this country, there is no description and there are no names given to any constituencies. There are no boundaries given. So we found that objectionable. So we have raised this with the Constitutional Court, and our prayer is in three parts. The first one is that the delimitation report must be declared null and void. It must be invalidated. Number two, pursuant to the constitutional provisions, ZEC must redo its report because it is the only authority that can do the delimitation. Then number three, proclamation of election dates must only happen after the president has received a fresh report, a regular, legal, constitutional report. Now, some people have said that we are applying for a postponement. No, we are not applying for a postponement of elections. We are simply saying the playing field must be made even. Just like there are two important documents that all political parties must be concerned with in an election, and that is the voters' roll and the delimitation report. So I am aware of some people who have challenged the voters' roll. We are also challenging on the voters' roll if it is not given. and the delimitation report. So that is our application, and the application will be heard on Monday, the 8th of May. As you know, this application is always presented in two parts. The first application for direct access, we are now past that. We succeeded on the basis that our case was strong. Now, I have heard many people saying our rights to have election in November, in October, in August are violated. Now, there is no right in our law of elections in July or to elections in August. There is the right to free and fair elections. Now, the election, the timetable for the election is provided somewhere in the Constitution, but it is not in the Bill of Rights. So where you have two items, one in the Bill of Rights and one which is not in the Bill of Rights, and they conflict, the one in the Bill of Rights takes precedence. So an unfair delimitation will result in an unfair election because there is so much asymmetry in the information. Maybe there are some people who know how many people are in Nyanga North. I don't. We don't. Maybe there are people who know how many people were 17 last year and are now 18 this year. They may know, but we don't. We don't have that information. And why is that information necessary? It is to enable the political parties to participate effectively in voter registration. Now, if you have information about where those people are, who were 17 last year, who are now 18 this year, you are able to concentrate and focus on those areas for purposes of voter education and voter registration. That information is simply not there.
Senator Mwonzora, as you were speaking, you said that the delimitation report in some of the constituencies and in some of the wards, the ZEC failed to abide by the 20% threshold. But you are saying that, to me again, that you don't know the numbers in those constituencies. So how do you come to the 20%?
We do know the number of registered voters in that constituency is at the 30th of May 2022. That is the information that is there. There is no other information apart from that. So the number of registered voters is at that time, we do know. But the number of people in that constituency, we don't know. That will be got from the census now. I could tell you that if I had the population census and I could see the distribution, I would tell you that in this constituency, 10,000 people are now over 18, are now 18 all over since last year. And therefore, I am able to focus. That information, blessed, is not there.
The Constitution says that delimitation should happen after census. Now, you're saying that the census results have not been availed. What was the logic behind the Constitution saying that delimitation should happen after census when delimitation can actually even happen before the census results are released?
No. The delimitation cannot happen before census results are out. This is the mistake that ZEC made. ZEC is confusing a census to enumeration, to counting. Yes, counting was done between February and April last year, but there is no declaration of results, which will then complete the census. It's like voting. Voting is not only polling, marking of the ballot papers. It is polling, collation, and declaration of the results. Then you have a vote has happened. And now ZEC went very literal to say, well, the Constitution says after the census. It doesn't say we should wait for the results of the census. There is one principle of law which says that there is no legal provision which is there for decoration. There is no legal provision which is there for simple window dressing. There is a purpose. And the Constitution in that section mentioned population in more than two clauses. The first clause is clause 6, section 1611, and the other one is 1616, if I'm not mistaken. And the first one is general. We are saying after the population census, do delimitation. For what purpose did we put that? So that you consider the population is a relevant consideration. And just in case people thought that it was irrelevant, in subsection 6, we then list the factors that must be considered in registration. And subsection 6F, we anchor that subsection 6 by the provision that you should consider population. It is put at the very end. And those people who know legal drafting know that that means we were emphasizing on it.
But doesn't it say that delimitation is supposed to be based on the number of registered voters?
Certainly not, blessed. The number of registered voters is one consideration. And if you go to subsection 6, the last one, you will see all the factors. Number of registered voters is one of the factors. The community of interest, geography, and the population. Now, population means population. Population means people in all the demographic groups. Now, ZEC segmented the population and singled out only registered voters. Now, the delimitation is not only for purposes of voting, remember, it is also for purposes of resource distribution. So we do have people who are of voting age who don't vote on account of religion.
Senator, let us talk about you saying that the proclamation by the president missed certain elements. It didn't have the names, didn't have the annexures. Is this a matter of incompetence?
Well, I don't know what it is. I can't tell. I did approach the Minister of Constitutional Affairs, or of Justice, Legal and Constitutional Affairs, before I filed my application. And I said that the gazetted report lacks certain information. And I was given the impression that a correction was going to be done. So I don't know what really led to that. And then the issue of the proclamation, I think they just thought that once they make a proclamation and attach the delimitation report, then it should be enough. No, it is not enough. You must actually, the president must actually proclaim the names of each constituency in this country, and he must proclaim the boundaries of the constituents. For example, if you are to describe Nyanga North, they would describe Nyanga North as the land between the Gaires River, the Arwenya River, and the Mazarura Mountains. It is to be contained in the gazetted report. Remember, when a report is gazetted, it assumes the force of law. It's no longer an ordinary thing. Everything that has to be done in terms of that report. So the act of gazetting is also an act of putting legal effect on it. So I don't know how that error came to being.
I mean, this is huge. You are calling it an error. If you are correct, Senator Mwonzora, would that be an error?
Well, it is definitely a misdirection, but I don't know why. I'm saying it was I was saying error because at one point the minister told me that a correction may be done.
And it has not been done.
I haven't seen it. I think because also they were then faced with this legal case, and correcting it would be a huge admission.
You also, looking at the delimitation report, there was a letter that came to Parliament from other commissioners who said that they were excluded. Now, is this a big issue that only 2 commissioners believe that this report is the proper delimitation report?
Unfortunately, blessed, the issue of the 7 commissioners who did not associate themselves with the report, unfortunately didn't come before Parliament. they wrote straight to the president. But we got to know it from the letter that was written by Professor Maduku in one of the cases that he was handling. And then why we didn't consider it in the ad hoc committee was that it was not a letter written to us. It was a letter written to the head of state. But that does point out that there was something wrong within the Zimbabwe Election Commission. Now, it actually fortifies our case. We have a delimitation report that all the MPs condemned except one. Some ZEC commissioners dissociated themselves with, and one political party is challenging in court. So that strengthens our case. There is something wrong with the delimitation report. And if you look at the petition that was written by those commissioners, at least from the copy that I saw on social media, they actually say that the delimitation report doesn't comply with the section that with section 161. And no surprise, the irregularities that I am pointing to you exist. So that is a very, very big issue in my view.
You mentioned, Senator, that dialogue had failed. That's why you went to court. You have been a proponent of rational disputation. And I remember asking you this question, that you have accused ZANU-PF of killing members who have supported the opposition. And at one point you made a statement that Mnangagwa killed again, and we cannot trust him to have dialogue. Why were you trusting him to have dialogue then? No, and now you're saying dialogue.
At no point did I say I trust ZANU-PF to agree to dialogue. What I said, Blessed, was that dialogue was the correct thing to do. Not that ZANU-PF will be trusted with agreeing to dialogue. I never made that. I said at this point in time in Zimbabwe, dialogue is the only way that we can resolve the national question. And I was right, wasn't I? Because had there been dialogue, we would have resolved these issues on the table. Both ZEC, the political parties in parliament, other stakeholders would have sat on the table and avoided this embarrassment that is coming now. I was very, very correct. But you were not correct, because you said rational disputation will solve these things, and it has failed. Rational disputation.
You confirmed that you went to court because dialogue has failed.
Rational disputation as a concept is the most correct concept in Zimbabwe. It is what Zimbabwe is lacking. We are where we are today because there is no rational disputation. Rational disputation means that you talk, I listen to you, I talk, you listen to me, and we do not fight over opinions. We give each other our opinions. And by the way, I said that dialogue will be the answer. Dialogue was not done. And right now we have a conundrum. We have an international and national crisis, actually, because as you were making your introduction, you seem to think that if the court were to rule that we go back to the old boundaries, it will not precipitate a postponement.
Let's talk about that later. But I want us to zero in on this aspect, which is for me, for our viewers as well, very, very important. You have been in the trenches as an opposition leader for a very, very long time, and you know who ZANU-PF is. In fact, I remember it's Luke Tambarinyoka who was saying that ZANU-PF is the bride that changes the contents of a marriage certificate the eve before a marriage. They indicate right and turn left. You have known them. What made you think that they would take you seriously when you talk about
it?
Dialogue?
Was not a question of whether they should take me seriously or not. It was a question of what was right. And I still maintain that dialogue was right. There was no other substitute methods. Those in the opposition who were disputing that dialogue was the correct way to go did not proffer anything, did not do anything that forestalled this problem. So if you say dialogue does not work, confrontation also did not work. So the methods that opposition people were talking about appear not to have worked. So to zero in on dialogue will be a mistake. But the fact that people did not agree to dialogue does not mean that it is wrong. Actually, the events that have happened, they have actually shown that we should have dialogue over this thing. These are administrative issues. These are simple, commonsensical issues. And when it didn't work, when dialogue didn't work, I didn't stop there. I took the next option. And the next option for me was to go to court. And it so far is proven to be effective. I don't know how the courts will rule in the final result. But other political parties have just sat down. There is an illegal delimitation report. Our people are going to suffer for it. And people have just sat at home. I have not sat at home. We have not sat at home as the MDC. We have sought to do something about it. And I think that Zimbabweans must join us in that.
I stand corrected, but I've heard everyone in the political circles saying that dialogue is the best way to go, but they just don't trust ZANU-PF to do the right thing.
Well, they could.
This is why I'm asking you why.
They could be correct. You are wrong to say that I trusted ZANU-PF. Okay. I trusted the prescription of dialogue. Whether ZANU-PF was going to agree or not remained still to be seen. But the prescription was correct. The strategy for ZANU-PF is entirely up to it. But the fact that they've not heeded my call, it's not up to me now.
Justice Priscilla Chigumba, the ZEC chairperson, once said that once the president proclaimed an election, nothing short than of an earthquake can stop an election.
Well, she was very wrong, and I don't think she should have spoken in those words. She is a lawyer, she is a judge for that matter. She ought to have known that if the delimitation report was faulty, it was challengeable. And once it is challenged and it is invalidated, the proclamation by the president stands on nothing. The president would have proclaimed something that turns out to be invalid. So an election wouldn't happen. It's just like if ZEC were to say, let's go to election without a voters' roll, and the president proclaims an election. An election won't necessarily happen. Other people may go to court. That is why our system allows us, where the administrative authorities, the executive has erred, there is a check and a balance. There is a check of the judiciary. You go to court. And this is what we have done. So justice was, Chigumba, with all respect to her, was not correct there. And there is a very big possibility that on Monday, the Constitutional Court will find that the delimitation report is invalid.
But Senator, let us look at this insistence to continue with the election. You have mentioned and pointed out some of these glaring irregularities, and for me, the issue that there is no census result is just standing out there so loudly. But there is an insistence. The president has insisted that end of this month you proclaim the date for the election. And ZEC has insisted that it has done the correct thing and the right thing, and they are forging ahead and they are preparing for elections.
Well, this is very strange, and I'm also surprised that within the opposition circles, we have people who are also echoing what the president is saying, what ZEC is saying, that we go to elections anyway. This election, if we go to it with this delimitation report, is clearly unfair. It is clearly impugnable. It is clearly bad at law, and it will yield one result: an unfair result. And we will go back to the Constitutional Court, I think, as we did in 2018, challenging the presidential election results again. So this insistence may mean that the errors that are in the delimitation report may be deliberate. But there are people like ourselves who have discovered them and who are not afraid to bring them before the courts of law. But Zimbabweans must reject going to elections under this delimitation report. It is wrong. The constitution is there not for decoration. It represents a social contract between those who rule and those who are ruled. And constitutions are put there precisely, blessed, out of the distrust of politicians. That's why we put it down in writing.
But Senator, there's this also massive distrust of the judiciary in this country.
Well, I don't know about that. Certainly, it's not coming from me, blessed. I hope that I know the judges of who are going to sit in the Constitutional Court. I have appeared before them in other matters, in other forums, and so on and so forth. And I would like to believe that they are men and women of integrity.
You can't be serious, Senator. When you have a judgment for elections, that was a challenge judgment for elections that was done by Morgan Tsvangirai. It's not yet out. How do you
what I'm saying
how do you have trust for a system like that?
What I'm saying, blessed, is that I hope, and I really hope, that everybody who is going to deal with this matter is going to understand how important it is, not for himself or herself, his part or her party, but for the nation of Zimbabwe. And this election holds S's to a number of things. Zimbabwe is under international isolation, and as a result of sanctions and other measures, and the sanctions in Zidera are contained in a law that is very, very clear. One of the preconditions for the upliftment of the sanctions is to conduct free and fair elections. One of the preconditions to join the Commonwealth is conducting of free and fair elections. And pushing Zimbabweans, chaperoning Zimbabweans into an election of this caliber is being irresponsible. It is furthering the international isolation of Zimbabwe. And we should not agree to that.
Do you think, sitting there rationally, Senator Mwonzora, that the ruling party cares about what the United States of America thinks? I mean, the sanctions against the Zimbabwe by the UK, Britain and EU have almost all but fallen off.
The ZANU-PF may not care, but the people of Zimbabwe who are suffering do care. I care. My party cares. Many people who are right-minded do care about international isolation. Remember that one of the arguments we made for the upliftment of sanctions is that they have a tendency of enriching an elite. People smuggle gold, people smuggle precious minerals through regular ports of entry under the guise of sanction busting. And if those things are removed, then we do not have people benefiting from the crisis. There are people in Zimbabwe who are making millions, if not billions, out of the crisis. But they are a tiny minority. We as the MDC, we are speaking as a social democratic party for the average man and the average woman. We have been impoverished by this system, by this state of affairs. So our going to the Constitutional Court is an act of responsibility. We may fail, we may not succeed in what we want to do, but we would rather try. We would rather try. And we owe that duty to Zimbabwe.
Some believe that given your poor showing as a party in the by-elections that came on 26 March last year, you are more afraid of elections and any postponement will benefit you.
But blessed, I didn't write the delimitation report. I did not create the irregularities in the delimitation report. So the basis of the challenge of the delimitation report are the irregularities in it. Those irregularities were not put there by the MDC. The MDC simply found them and thought that it was irresponsible not to challenge them. So what some people are saying that we are afraid of elections is hogwash. And some people say we are not prepared for elections. I have not seen a political party in this country that is prepared for elections as we speak. Every political party is still enmeshed in internal systems in order to prepare for the elections. There is no political party that is prepared for elections in this country.
You are not prepared for elections.
We certainly are preparing for the election, but we can't tell you that if the elections were to be called tomorrow, we are prepared. We are not yet fully prepared for the election, just like any other political party.
How do you speak for other political parties?
Because no political party has given us their candidates, and those who have given us their candidates, there are still internal processes taking place. We do know that, so you can't say they are ready. We are also doing our candidate selection processes. And we will, of course, when the election is called, we will be able to participate in the election. But we hope that the election will be done in terms of a regular delimitation report. What do Zimbabweans lose? What does anybody lose if the elections were to be slightly deferred and the correct thing done? I think if you look at the cost-benefit analysis, it is better to proceed that way, because if the government is going to force this election, that means that the sanctions will remain. That means the international isolation will remain. That means that the national resentment that it comes as a result of unfree and unfair election will happen. What happened in 2018? The shootings that happened on the 1st of August, and the shootings that happened between the 14th and the 16th of January 2019, all have their genesis as the unfair and unfree elections. So there will be bloodletting. So why don't we forestall that? We have to do the honorable thing, correct our systems, remove the international pariah tag that we are holding. Zimbabwe has a constitution. Now, what people who are saying let's go to elections are in fact saying is the delimitation report is irregular, it is wrong, it is unfair, but it doesn't matter. That's what they are saying.
But this report came to Parliament. Wouldn't it have been logical at that point when it came to Parliament to say this report cannot stand the test of time, let us have a new one?
Parliament actually pointed out to all the irregularities that I'm talking about. We did not invent our own irregularities.
No, I'm saying is their power, it was their power.
No, Parliament does not have that power, because it could not presume that once it pointed out these wrong things, ZEC would be adamant. It didn't presume that. There was presumption that ZEC would look at the president, and ZEC would look at these irregularities and apply their minds to it. Apparently ZEC did not, and the gazetting was done oblivious of the observations of Parliament. But we did not foresee that they would do that at that point in time.
Do you then trust adamant ZEC to run a free and fair election when it couldn't listen to the people's representatives, which is Parliament?
That is why, blessed, we are saying that ZEC cannot run a free and fair election under this delimitation report.
But even if you're going to change it and they are adamant, like you're saying, and they insist that this is the right thing, even though there's a parliamentary report as you speak which says, and there's all these legal issues, and they are in court defending what you're talking about.
Well, the MDC respects the duty of ZEC to do delimitation, because that's what the Constitution says.
I am talking about the caliber of the people that are running. Are you satisfied with them?
Well, the fact that I'm challenging Blessed is that I'm not satisfied with their product. But there is blame has gone, of course, to the ZEC commissioners, the the ZEC chairperson even, but I think that is slightly unfair. What happened is that when they were doing their delimitation, they did rely on external experts. I think there was a mathematician or a geography teacher, I don't know, who has filed an application in the, an affidavit in the Constitutional Court, insisting that the 20% that is being mentioned in the Constitution, in fact, means 20 plus 20. Very strange reasoning, but it's coming from an expert. And the ZEC,
hired by who?
By ZEC, of course.
So why are you absolving ZEC?
I'm saying that I'm not completely absolving ZEC, but I'm saying that the criticism has to take into account that they did rely on experts, and the experts did let them down. There is some moral blameworthiness that goes away where you are relying on expert advice. If your doctor, blessed, were to give you a wrong prescription and you trust him and you take it.
But if you get second opinion and third opinion and they're telling you that this is wrong and you still insist, because for me, the question I asked earlier, the insistence, the push to even continue, even when you have some other people coming with different expertise and telling you that this could be wrong.
Yes, I remember Professor Mtambara did write something about the 20%. Elton Mangoma did write something. I think a number of people, and this was free wisdom, free advice. I would have taken it. But you know, I'm not ZEC. I'm not there to defend them. I was simply pointing out that there is more than ZEC that was involved in this thing.
So my question is still unanswered. Would you trust them to run a free and fair election? When the election happens?
Under this delimitation report? Oh no, of course not.
No, not even under the delimitation report.
Under the corrected delimitation report.
Under the current ZEC leadership.
No, blessed. Are you saying there are two things here? I need to understand your question. There is holding of elections under this delimitation report. It's a no. And let's say, for example, ZEC corrects, redoes the delimitation report and does it in a correct manner and to the satisfaction of every Zimbabwean. I think it will be too presumptuous to say that they will commit yet another irregularity. I don't think that will be, you're asking me to postulate. We will cross the bridge when we come to it. But right now, our beef with ZEC is not based on anything else. It is based on the delimitation report that is wrong. And we have pointed it out.
Earlier on you pointed that most political parties are not ready for elections. And some have actually said that the biggest political party that is not ready for elections and fears elections is ZANU-PF itself as it stands. And they have accused you of pushing an agenda on behalf of ZANU-PF, so that election.
I think that is a very big insult, and it insults my intellect. And I think for the first time, let me talk about my intellect. I am not average. I am not somebody who is intellectually incompetent, and I think I've demonstrated it in this country. I am a co-author of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and I was a lecturer of law at 2 universities in this country, and therefore I can think on my own. This is not the first time that I, as Douglas Mwonzora, have challenged the government in the courts. You may want to know that in 1995, at the age of 25, I tried to stop the elections of 1995 together with the trustee Sengwayo. We were unsuccessful on the basis that we had brought the application too late. That's what the judges said. And 2 years later, at the age of 27, I challenged the Political Parties Finances Act, this time successfully. I have argued a number of cases successfully and so on. So for people to just keep on insulting me, to say you are doing this because you are sent by someone, I think it's rather unfair to me.
But
And I think those people should have themselves done something better.
But do you think people who are intelligent cannot be sent?
I have not been sent.
No, but you are saying that you are intelligent and stuff
I
like that.
have not
My
been,
question is, do you think people
I
who
have
are
not been,
intelligent cannot be sent?
A person like me cannot be sent. A person like me cannot be sent, blessed. Why? Because I understand the historical significance of this. And I am taking this action because it is in the best interest of Zimbabwe. And let those people who are critiquing me suggest a better option out of this conundrum. What they are saying is that the delimitation report is wrong. But okay, let's just go to election. And when Mwonzora challenges it, for the benefit of Zimbabweans, they say he has been sent. No, I think on my own, and I think better than them.
If the election, if your application is not successful, what do you think would be the offing for Zimbabwe?
It will be tragic, blessed. We will be going to the election with which is clearly flawed from the start. It means that we will retain the pariah tag that we have. It will also mean that we will remain under international isolation. It will also mean that we may have in this election quite a lot of violence, and there are telltale signs that there could be violence in this election. But there are three outcomes in this election, in this petition. The first is where we succeed, and we think that fairly judged we should succeed, but we can't presume that the judges will be with us in all the things that we'll say. The second one is where the judges just dismiss the matter. Again, it will be very tragic because they did make a finding in the previous application that we had a strong case. There has to be a stronger case against ours. And from the papers that have been submitted in opposition, it has been the same argument. Now that the only difference is that we now have 7 judges. Then the third option is where the report is invalidated, and the court then says go to 2018. Now that will be doubly tragic. Number one, it will lead to a postponement again, because the president has to proclaim the old boundaries, and he has to give 6 months notice. So we would have postponed the election, but gone to an irregular one for that matter. Remember the current boundaries, they were made in 2007, 2008. They are 15 years old, number one. Number two, they were made under a different authority. I think Mr. Tobayo, they were still very influential then. So you will have an awkward situation where the voters' roll belongs to ZEC, but the boundaries belong to Mdede. That will be a very awkward situation. Number three, the old delimitation which gave these current boundaries was made in terms of a repealed constitution, the old constitution. Bringing it back means that you are resuscitating the old constitution. So for the period of the election and immediately after that, blessed, this country will be having 2 constitutions running concurrently, the new one and the old one. Then number 4, somewhere in section 161(6), the constitution says that with respect to with the exception of the first delimitation, in other delimitations, ZEC must consider old boundaries. Stated in simpler English, in respect to other delimitations, old boundaries are relevant. In terms of the first delimitation, old boundaries are irrelevant. Now you can't say, and this delimitation is actually the first delimitation, so the old boundaries are irrelevant. You can't say they are irrelevant in one breath and then let's use them in another breath. So I think it will be wrong to go to the 2008 delimitation report. It will be doubly tragic in my view.
I want to thank you very much, Senator Mwonzora, for giving us your time and wishing you all the best in your constitutional challenge. We will be speaking to you again after the Constitutional Court has delivered its verdict, and we'll hear from you. But before I let you go, just a word that if there's anything that you want to say to the people of Zimbabwe.
Yes, thank you. The people of Zimbabwe, your political party, the vanguard for democracy, the movement for democratic change, is inviting us to fight together for free and fair elections. This delimitation report will make sure that the elections are not free and fair. We bear the historic responsibility of stopping this rot. We bear the historic responsibility for ensuring that the international isolation of Zimbabwe is removed. The international isolation of Zimbabwe will not be removed with this delimitation. In our fight for the delimitation, against the delimitation, we are not prolonging the suffering of the people of Zimbabwe. We are actually shortening the period of the suffering of the people of Zimbabwe. Because should we go with this delimitation, the old problems will remain. By the way, this delimitation governs two elections, the 2023 elections and the 2028 elections. It is our noble duty to fight against this delimitation, and we invite all right-thinking Zimbabweans to have a date with us at the Constitutional Court on the 8th of May 2023. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mwonzora, for your time. And thank you, Zimbabwe. Now, this was the Free Talk. This is the Free Talk with me, your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. And we continue to answer the questions for you. The so what, why should you care? Why should this bother you? And this is Zimbabwe. This is our country too. We all have a right to listen, to be heard, to be listened to, and to build this country. This is the Free Talk, proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. And I, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, in conversation with Senator Douglas Mwonzora.